Hello, my name is Samantha Lewis. I am an undergraduate student at George Mason University. Today I will speak with you about teenage drug use, overdoses, and the importance of Narcan. As drugs on the street become increasingly dangerous, giving you the correct information to educate your child and keep them safe is essential. Imagine you are at work and you get a call from your child's school that your child took drugs or overdosed, and first responders could not revive them. This happens more often than you'd think. According to UCLA Health, in the last 10 years, over 100,000 adolescents ranging from 14 to 18 years have died due to an overdose. As teen overdoses increase, many question why there is little information regarding overdoses, addiction, and the availability of Narcan to the public. According to Robert Giebelhoff, a reporter for the Washington Post, drugs are becoming more and more dangerous, as fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that can be up to 50 times more potent than heroin, has contaminated America's illicit drug supply. Drug experimentation has become exponentially riskier. Just the smallest amount of fentanyl can kill you. So how are teens getting their hands on it? The simple answer is they don't know they're taking it. When a teen is looking to buy drugs, they are looking for easily accessible and cheap drugs like Adderall, weed, Percocets, and sometimes cocaine. An overdose is when someone takes a large amount of drugs in a short period of time, usually in one sitting. So when an overdose happens, it's because the drugs teens intend to buy are either laced or counterfeit, meaning there is a more dangerous drug than the one originally sought out. And because they don't know what's in there and they take too much, they overdose. So how can we prevent our children from doing drugs and overdosing? You can. If a teen wants to do something, they will, especially if they're told no. But there is something you can do if an overdose does occur. Though a controversial solution to combating the ongoing war with opioids, Naxalone, commonly known as Narcan, is currently our most effective treatment when faced with an opioid overdose. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, Naxalone is a life-saving medication that can reverse an overdose from opioids, including heroin, fentanyl, and prescription medications, when given in time. There are two versions of Narcan, the injectable version, which medical professionals mainly use, and the nasal spray, which is the most common version used by civilians and first responders. Narcan is important for everyone to have access to, but it is not as accessible as you would think. Though many assume Narcan is a prescription medication and can only get it through a doctor, that is false. You do, however, have to ask the pharmacist for it. There is no age limit to Narcan, and anyone should be able to get it. However, that is only sometimes the case, as pharmacists and insurance companies need to be appropriately informed about the liability laws that protect them when selling Narcan. So even though it is labeled as an over-the-counter medication, it can be very challenging to obtain. The CDC mentions that carrying Naxalone is no different than carrying an epinephrine autoinjector, known as an EpiPen, for someone with allergies. It simply provides an extra layer of protection for those who are at higher risk of an overdose. As our children get older, we cannot always protect them and be with them wherever they go. And those times away from parents is when they'll buy and use drugs. School is one of the most common places teens purchase and use drugs, increasing the likelihood of overdosing at school. When a student overdoses at school, administrators do not always think of an overdose at first because of how young they are and because they aren't being adequately trained to identify overdoses. In Connecticut, a 13-year-old student overdosed and died because the staff at school did not think that someone at that age could be overdosing. Dave Collins, a reporter for the U.S. News, wrote, Hartford Mayor Luke Bronin said that because of the student's young age, an opioid overdose did not immediately come to mind when the school nurse and first responders who did have Naxalone treated him. If the nurse had administered Narcan as a precaution, the student might still be alive. Most medications cannot be administered just in case, because they are used for specific reasons and could potentially cause harm. However, that is not the case for Narcan. Though Narcan will only reverse the effects of an opioid overdose, it will not harm someone if opioids are not in their system. It will just be ineffective. Doctors Patel and Watson from Medical News Today wrote, "There aren't any known safety issues with giving a person Narcan when they don't need it. Narcan does not affect a person who's sober from opioids, sober meaning they don't have opioids in their system. If you suspect but aren't certain that a person has overdosed on opioids, you should still give them a dose of Narcan. This is because opioid overdoses may, in some cases, be fatal if it isn't treated. In this situation, it's best to go ahead and give Narcan to this person just in case." Understanding that Narcan can be used even if it's not an overdose is essential. It is better to be safe than sorry. The more educated kids are, the more they will be able to identify an overdose if the school cannot, and potentially save lives. Since Narcan does not threaten someone's health, it has become one of the most effective ways to save someone's life. However, Narcan is not a safety blanket for you to continue using drugs. Narcan is to keep you alive long enough for first responders to get to you, not as a reason to continue to abuse drugs, because eventually it will not save you. For this reason, many are reluctant to use Narcan or educate their kids because they don't want to put the idea of drug use in their heads or potentially traumatize them with images of overdosing or even thinking about that. Addiction is not a choice, and anyone can overdose, whether you are an addict or not, regardless of what anyone else says. Allison Coleman from the NRPA noted, "Another reason for hesitation from the field to carry Naxalone relates to the misunderstanding of substance use disorder as a choice or a lifestyle, rather than a disease. As NRPA has navigated the opioid crisis over the years, it's become clear that the stigma and prolonged narrative that positions those struggling as substance abusers rather than people with a substance use disorder impacts the ability to respond to the epidemic with empathy and through a public health lens." Cleve Woodson from the Washington Post quoted Richard Jones, sheriff of Butler County, Ohio. He caught public attention after saying his officers would never carry Narcan and made this alarming statement: "We don't do the shots for bee stings. We don't inject diabetic people with insulin. When does it stop? I'm not the one that decides if people live or die. They decide that when they stick the needle in their arm." Views like this are hazardous and could be the difference between life and death in young children, especially when it comes from people who are supposed to protect and serve the community. The war on opioids also becomes a war on personal opinion. However, there are many more reservations that you may also have against not wanting to educate your kid or train them about Narcan. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, in nearly 40% of overdose deaths, someone else was present. Having Naxalone available allows bystanders to help a fatal overdose and save lives. Those who are present have been using drugs are also afraid to administer Narcan or call for help because they fear getting charged with a crime. With many overdoses having a bystander present, the CDC has made it clear that Good Samaritan laws are in place in most states to protect those who are overdosing and anyone assisting them in an emergency from arrest, charges, or a combination of those. These laws protect your child and anyone else who is saving a life from legal consequences. But many have no idea these laws exist. The more people that know about these laws, the more lives we can save. Some people have worried that the parents would be upset if someone had given Narcan to their child. Though, when put into perspective, no one wants their child dead. The idea of your child overdosing is a terrifying image. But imagine if your child was the one that was overdosing and you couldn't get there in time. Wouldn't you want someone to be able to save your child? Your child could also be the one saving someone else's life if given the proper education and training. Another reason parents are hesitant to allow their kids to be the ones administering Narcan is the safety of their children. Narcan reverses the effects of an overdose, meaning that in less than 30 minutes, one can start to withdraw. And withdrawal can be painful and can sometimes cause people to react physically. NRPA's Allison Coleman said, "It's important to note that Naxalone itself does not cause violence. Rather, if someone is dependent on opioids, including chronic pain medication, they will be very uncomfortable when revived by Naxalone. Naxalone reverses the effects of an opiate, causing intense discomfort and withdrawal symptoms, which can sometimes result in physical reactions that may include violent outbursts. It is essential to train your child physically and mentally for a situation like this, but also to remind the person who was revived that the discomfort will not last forever. If your child feels they are not physically able to handle aggressive behavior, don't know what they're doing, or don't want to be in harm's way, they may not administer Narcan. Though it is scary, if emergency responders have been called, there is a chance that the withdrawal reactions may not present themselves. Narcan is not a dangerous medication. It is an added safety measure to prevent overdose deaths. As teens become more curious and experiment, they must be educated and know what to look out for so it does not end one's life. As I mentioned, teenagers are stubborn. They will find a way if they genuinely want to do something. If you wish to accept it or not, it may be your kid, but it could also be your child that could be the reason someone else's child lives to see another day. Narcan is currently the most effective medicine when fighting the opioid war. It does not cure you of addiction, but it can save your life. Too many lives have been lost due to opioids or because Narcan was not on hand. How many more lives will we lose before access to Narcan and drug education become our top priority? Thank you.